All right, my phone is off. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Digging in the Crates, a series powered by and brought to you by the Melanated Archives. I'm your host, Kendra Touche, or just Kendra, the creator of the Melanated Archives and the Melanated Archives podcast. Welcome on back. Come on in, y'all. I'm so glad that you're here because today we're doing what we always do best. We're getting loud, right? And getting real and getting loving about the trailblazing melanated stars of TV, film, and theater who made us all think, laugh, and also reflected real life back to us, one project at a time. Today's story is about more than just a character. It's about a child, a pioneer, a legacy, and hopefully it serves as a reminder that children are indeed sacred. As we've always known and have been reminded once again in more recent times with docu-series like the 5-part series Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV, things are not always as they appear. And when a child is put in the spotlight of Hollywood, being treated as disposable isn't such a rare thing. This is the story of William Billy Thomas Jr., known to the world and remembered by most as Buckwheat. William Thomas Jr. was born on March 12, 1931 in Los Angeles, California. He was the son of William Thomas, a janitor at the Wilton apartment building in Hollywood. Now, the Thomases were a Black working class family during the Great Depression, a time when opportunities were scarce and virtually non-existent for Black children wanting to break into the entertainment industry unless you fit a very narrow mold. Now, Billy was the third of 4 children and was described by those who knew him as shy, observant, and quietly charming. According to multiple accounts, it was Billy's mother who actually took the time and the initiative to bring him to auditions. She escorted him to the casting call at Hal Roach Studios, which was looking to replace the departing Our Gang star Matthew Stymie Beard. Let's pause here for a moment for a quick historical reference. Our Gang was a groundbreaking American comedy short film series that began in the 20s and it continued all the way up until the 1940s. It was created and produced by Hal Roach of Hal Roach Studios, like I just mentioned a second ago. And the series followed a group of poor neighborhood kids, Black and white, who got into everyday adventures and mischief. And basically, it was groundbreaking because it was the first time that people deliberately broke the laws of segregation, at least on film, by showing people, children in particular, from different backgrounds, exploring, learning, and showing audiences the world as they saw it at that time. Now, it was later renamed The Little Rascals, and the rest is TV and film history. So hence how all of that came to be. And yes, as I painted all of that with some glass, rosy colored glasses, we all know there was plenty of backlash and there was some racially questionable depictions of the show. We'll get into that, but for now, let's just get back to Mr. William Thomas's story. Now, while William wasn't the only child brought in, he did stand out, not necessarily for his showmanship or for being precise, but for his sweet demeanor and expressive face. As I mentioned, he was a Pisces, so come on. Shout out to y'all though. Hal Roach and his team, they immediately loved him and believed that he had a certain kind of look that they needed for the camera. He was just 3 years old at the time, so they hired him and they started him out at $40 a week. His role would eventually evolve over time, but from day one, Billy was part of the rare integrated cast, and as I mentioned before, something that was virtually unheard of in 1930s Hollywood. From that moment on, William Thomas would go on to become a permanent fixture in American culture. But it came at a cost. Now, prior to taking on the role of Buckwheat, back then Buckwheat was a character that already existed on the show. It was originally portrayed by 2 little girls, Carlina Beard, who was ironically the sister to Matthew Stymie Beard, and another little girl later on named Willie Mae Walton. Now, when Thomas stepped into the role, the gender of the character of Buckwheat was not automatically changed at all. As a matter of fact, in a 1935 episode called Mama's Little Pirate, Buckwheat was still being portrayed as a girl. So I guess you could say that William Thomas Jr. was the first, if not the only, child star to portray an androgynous look on camera at the time. And it wasn't until Stymie Beard actually left the show that Buckwheat's gender gradually shifted. And by 1936, the character was definitely being referred to as a male. But this is also where we start to see the breakdown of those racial stereotypes that I told you would come up at some point. Because even though Buckwheat's gender had changed, the image of Buckwheat did not. The character's look, which basically consisted of oversized clothes, pigtails, and wild hair, bulging eyes, and a jumbled up speech, let's just go ahead and call a spade a spade. Buckwheat was the embodiment of a racist pickaninny caricature. Basically a child's version of the Step and Fetch It minstrel character. And I'll cover him in another show, but once again, there's a lot of history here and we're just gonna take it one step at a time. It wasn't until an episode called Pay As You Exit that the character adopted his more familiar look with those overalls and that striped shirt and that unkept afro. And here's a disturbing part. In a 1936 episode called General Spanky, this is very disturbing, little William Thomas portrayed a young slave asking to be given a master. I'll let y'all take a water break on that one.
Oh, hell no!
Okay, we back, y'all good? All right, we gotta keep on going with this history. As many performers of that time, and in this case, as many families of that time did, his family did exactly what they felt like they needed to do. And for young William Thomas and his family, that meant that they put up with some things, or that they felt as though it was okay or not as bad to be treated in such a demeaning way. They were trying to survive, and little William stuck around with the Our Gang series for nearly a decade, appearing in all but one of the shorts between 1934 to 1944. He became the only cast member to appear in all 52 of the MGM produced Our Gang episodes, and the only cast member from the original Hal Roach era to remain there until the very end of the series. But here's a little sparkle of innocence that I think speaks to how many truths and perspectives to any given story can exist, and how vastly different a child's experience can be versus the full vision of what adults are doing or participating in around them. So little William and Eugene Porky Lee, they played a duo on camera, right? But they were best friends in the series as both Buckwheat and Porky, and also in real life. They became best friends behind the scenes as well. So the little kids would often get together and they would outsmart the older kids, because not only did they bond over being two of the youngest cast members on the show, but they both had speech impediments, right, as children, which ironically led to the now iconic phrase, "Oh, they." See? That came from a very innocent place. A lot of authors, they like to say that the Little Rascals and all of the Black castmates and members at the time were considered saviors for the Black community. Now, as a Black person, I would not go as far as to say that. I know what they were trying to say. They were basically trying to say because these stars were visible during the Jim Crow segregation era on television. And that's the thing. I recognize that the silent generation and the boomers who grew up watching the original series, they grew up thinking that they loved the show because it was a representation of themselves. For instance, my mother grew up in Detroit, and even though she saw the show in reruns in her early years, she did get a chance to meet William Thomas Jr. She felt like she was just infatuated by him because there weren't that many Black people on television at the time, let alone Black kids. So for her, it was the representation of seeing someone who looked like you command a stage and a screen screen and be not only seen, but heard and paid attention to. And I believe that was more empowering for Black people than anything. And once again, truths can coexist. And well after the show was over, Thomas would oftentimes be left to defend the character of Buckwheat and his experiences on the show. But remember, children don't always process systematic racism in the same way that adults do. So I'm sure that Mr. Thomas felt genuine joy and friendship and acceptance while filming that show. And that's what mattered to him. And honestly, that's a valid thing. Case in point, when I was a little girl growing up in the 90s in Kentucky, my best friend at daycare was a little white boy, right? And my experience with him was very innocent. It was very beautiful until one day his mother came to the school, saw us playing together, and she pulled him over to the side, but I could hear her tell him that she should never walk into that daycare ever again and see him playing with that little Black girl again. And even though I knew Black and white, I didn't know that there was such thing as racism and there was a problem, and it made me feel ashamed. So that night when I got home, I basically had a meltdown, and Mama Gail had to strip me of all my white dolls and give me little Black ones. And she made me get up early every morning for the rest of the year to tell myself in the mirror that I was a beautiful Black child that God made, and God did not make any mistakes. So I say all of that just to say that the voice of love sometimes can become louder than the outside noise. And maybe that's the space that Mr. Thomas lived in as a child on that set. I can only hope, at least. So after the Our Gang series ended, William Thomas quietly stepped away from the industry altogether. He, like so many young people at the time, enlisted in the service in 1954 and served honorably until 1956 and received both the National Defense Service Medal and the Good Conduct Medal. Now, he turned down opportunities to return to acting, calling it a rat race, which it had no security and he wasn't interested in. So instead, he built a long respected career as a film lab technician for Technicolor and Metrocolor. And here's something that's really, really cool and should bring you another ounce of joy. He actually worked on the films Jaws and Logan's Run. In his spare time, he was a citizen band radio operator, which I don't know what that was. I had to go and look it up because it was very techie, but he did this. I'll put the description somewhere on the screen. You can read it. He did it. He did well at it. He was a genius at it. So now, later on in life in New York City, he became known simply as Mr. B, a well-dressed, beloved doorman at the Franconia Hotel in Central Park West. And in July of 1980, Thomas was honored at a reunion of the Sons of the Deserts where he received a standing ovation from over 500 fans. That moment brought him to tears, and it came just in time because just 10 weeks later, on October 10th, 1980, William Thomas Jr. passed away at the age of 49, reportedly 46 years to the day after his first Our Gang audition. Isn't that something? His only child, whom he also named William Thomas Jr., would pick up the mantle, honoring his father by creating the Buckwheat Memorial Scholarship, and authored a memoir of his father, honoring his legacy before passing away himself in 2012. Mr. Thomas's story was mishandled completely even after his death. As famously reported in 1990, 10 years after his death, ABC's 2020 actually aired a segment. If you guys haven't seen this, it's crazy because they claim that they found the real Buckwheat alive and working as a grocery bagger. But it was a complete lie. The man featured on that news segment was a man by the name of Bill English, who had falsely claimed to be Thomas for years. The segment's depiction was only corrected when George Spanky McFarlane, go ahead, man, Thomas's former co-star and real life friend, stood 10 toes down and stepped forward to tell the truth that William Thomas, the real Buckwheat, had died in 1980. The fallout was swift, and the 2020 producer was eventually kicked to the curb, and ABC issued a formal apology, but the damage had already been done. The incident was a stark reminder of just how Black legacies, especially those of early performers, can be so easily erased or rewritten for convenience or even profit. This we know for sure. William Billy Thomas Jr. never chased fame. He didn't ask to be a symbol or a controversy, but in his quiet way, he carved out space in American film history that cannot and should not be forgotten or erased. He was more than Buckwheat. He was a child actor, an American soldier, a technician, a father, and a deeply human part of a complicated legacy. And for all of that, we honor him. And that concludes this episode of Digging in the Crates. Thank you guys so much once again for going down memory lane with me and for unearthing another powerful story from our archives. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The subscribe button is right down here. It's a small gesture that doesn't cost you a thing, but it means so much to me. You guys showed me so much love on the last video on Miss Lorraine Hansberry, and I just want to say that I see you and I thank you. It is not easy showing up and taking the time out of all the things that I have to do within the days, within the weeks, to do this kind of research and to film and edit these videos. But you know, I want us to get back to us, to understand our collective history. So I count this as an honor. So your support, your likes, your comments, your subscriptions, your love. If you want to go down into the description and find the link to my Cash App, you can bless me there. It's all appreciated and deeply felt. Make sure that you subscribe to the Melanated Archives podcast. The link is in the description below. Make sure that you follow us on all of our social media platforms for more deeply rich, deeply melanated profiles delivered on a regular basis. And as I always say, melanated isn't just a skin tone. It's a mindset too. And as long as you can see in color, it's never too late to help breathe life into a world that runs on love, truth, and respect for all of us living here. I'm Kendra Touche. Happy Pride Month, y'all. Enjoy your June. I'm out. Peace.